not a computer scientist. I'm not a data analyst. And I want to start my talk by saying that to emphasize that you don't need to be an engineer or even know how to write any code to be in AI today. I perceive the world around me, comprehend the complexity of processes that make up our daily lives, and I'm able to break that down to understand where machines and AI can impact our society. Now, that is the space my company, 114 AI, works in. Just a quick fact, the CEO and CTO of our company are both women. And we're taking along a team of men who believe in that vision. And that vision is simple, very similar to what some of our speakers have spoken about today. The ability to reason, to infer, to deduct is at the cornerstone of human cognition. And that is the next step to unlocking the value of AI. Our belief is that machines with augmented intelligence will be one of the most substantial next generation advances in this field. Now, an interesting metaphor I came across recently for machine cognition is background-foreground separation. Conceptually, there is a sea of overwhelming data being produced in an increasingly dynamic world. Technologies that relied on connecting the dots are no longer sufficient. There is a need to move a step further. Through this high volume, high veracity, and high variability of data, we need to enable machines to first find the dots and then complete the entire picture. So the image on the screen is a fantastic tool to demonstrate that concept. Now, at a first glance, it is merely the image of a tree bark. But if you look closely, there is a great tree frog camouflaged in that bark. Now, that animal has evolved to become virtually indistinguishable from its environment, but a seasoned expert would be able to identify it right away. That is the kind of knowledge that we need to impart to create those cognitive thinking pathways for AI. Now, Gary Marcus and Ernest Davis use a really interesting image on the cover of their book, Rebooting AI, Building Artificial Intelligence We Can Trust. Now, this is a sweet image of an AI-powered robot that steps into water. But fundamentally, what we see is that most of the achievements that we've made so far in AI have been in closed systems with a finite set of rules governing it, making it too narrow a framework to achieve actual intelligence in such a messy world. Real data is messy, it's complex, it's dynamic. A truly intelligent system will encompass the ability to sense the environment, analyze patterns, and use logical inference to augment intelligence. Smart and autonomous machines of the future will necessarily require a method to mimic human intelligence and decision-making pathways. Now, the first step to that process, as has been articulated by all of the speakers before me, is to get to a state where human and machine teaming is a reality, where machines are able to do what they do, which is distill through petabytes of data and bring to the forefront critical information, enabling the human in the loop to make data-backed and expert-vetted decisions at the click of a button. This also requires the ability to capture and codify expert knowledge, giving the machine the intelligence it needs to reason through these complex pathways. This brings us to step 2, where analytics is built on symbolic and sub-symbolic processing, which include things like common sense reasoning, background knowledge, episodic memory, and institutional memory. We use the cues from this sub-symbolic process and disambiguate them using reasoning techniques to get to that final cognitive state. One of the most important components, something that everybody in this conference has touched upon, that will define both the success and the viability of super intelligent machines is trust. As the technology matures, AI will be used to provide decision support to doctors, to space operators, to researchers, to governments and militaries, all looking for tools to leverage the tremendous amount of data being thrown at them, reduce their cognitive burden, and make better decisions. By focusing on provenance, tractability, and explainability of AI, we can move away from the current state of black box decision-making towards a world where we can all begin to trust the decisions coming from these machines. This is a necessary step before we even think about autonomous machines in our homes and on our streets. So to us, the next generation of AI is going to consist of a few things. Can we reduce the friction of adoption? Can we stretch the boundary of what can be achieved in a low-code or a no-code environment and drive even bigger value? Second, can we enable machine-to-machine hyperautomation or redirect the limited number of data scientists in the workforce away from the mundane and towards the more complex problems at the top of the value chain? Can we start to enable augmented intelligence or create methodologies for machines to think, reason, infer, and apply logic to enhance their productivity in complex operations? And finally, can we build an AI paradigm that inspires trust by establishing those cognitive pathways to maximize transparency and show provenance of decision-making? Shown on the screen is an infographic of our work at 114 AI. We're building a platform that is able to leverage data, analytic tools, and expert knowledge in order to get to cognition or augmented intelligence. The tool is a no-code environment which acts as the glue or the information architecture to fuse data, automate data transformation, capture expert knowledge, set up those analytic pipelines, and now use logical inference to enable the extraction of causal inferences from unstructured data. The entire pipeline uses innovative knowledge graphs, something which was again spoken about earlier today, providing explanations for each step of that inferencing process with a design that enables transparency and builds trust. Our goal is to break down the barriers and enable AI, reduce the friction on uptake and utilization, enable the development and scale of analytic pipelines, and use data to drive decision-making in this no-code environment. Our vision is to make AI ubiquitous in decision-making. And while this would unlock tremendous value across industries, it would also allow focus on areas of research that are not well-funded, that may not have the commercial value to justify the high spend that they would need to currently leverage AI. One such area especially close to my heart is for drug discovery or the repurposing of existing drugs to treat important and often dilapidating clinical conditions, which may not make financial sense. These technologies have long been touted for their promise to make the hunt for new drugs cheaper and more effective. The development of tools that can reduce the cost associated with trial and error, narrow down the list of candidate therapies, and reduce failure rates between phase 1 trials and regulatory approvals would have a substantial impact on some of the lower hanging fruit of clinical therapies. And with that, I conclude my talk for today. A big shout out and an emphatic thank you to the wonderful Candace Johnson for putting together such an incredible group of women for this conference. I am honored to be a part of it.